on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
And there's just not enough coffee on the planet to handle a morning like this. It's your 30th day of December of 2024, and well, it's going out with a whimper there, Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
It's been a challenging morning here at WMAL. If you were tuning in earlier and you heard that we were not on the air, we had a bit of a power outage situation. We got back up as of 6:05, and we're full steam ahead here. So thank you for your patience through all of that. Coming up at 7:35, Trevor Matich is going to. I was also about to say, Julia, that we understand our internet stream is still down, but we are heard at 105.9 FM. But I realized that anyone who's listening on the stream won't hear me say that. So there's really no use in pointing that out.
We're communicating with people on Twitter.
But just so you know, those of you listening to us at 105.9 FM here in Washington, you're the only ones who can hear. Coming up at 8:05, Sheriff Chuck Jenkins, and then at 8:35, Craig Shirley, presidential historian. That's Julie Gunlock. I'm Larry O'Connor. Joining us right now, as he always does at this time, is Joseph Digenova, our legal analyst and former U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. There's a lot to get to, Joe, but I think since you were a young lawyer in Washington about to join the Reagan administration there, you know full well Jimmy Carter as president and his legacy, and there's much to be said about it upon his passing, but I'd love for you to take a moment to reflect on it as well from your perspective.
Well, he was an interesting man at the time. The most important thing he ever did was pave the way for Ronald Reagan. Without Jimmy Carter, there is no Ronald Reagan. And so I salute him for 4 interesting years as President of the United States. He gave us the Ethics in Government Act, which gave us all the independent counsels, which hunted down public officials uselessly for years. And finally, when Carl Levin could no longer stop it, the law went out of existence. And he considered that, by the way, his greatest contribution, along with the peace accord between Egypt and Israel. He thought the Ethics in Government Act was his most important contribution. Yeah. It's one of those things in Washington, when you say, patriotism is the last refuge of a scoundrel, you haven't seen anything until you've seen reform.
Yeah, ethics reform in particular. Joe, you mentioned, though, some of the things that occurred during his presidency that were controversial and discussed, and many of them were reversed by Reagan, of course, through policy. But one thing that now incoming President Donald Trump is thinking of reversing is the handover of the Panama Canal. He has said that there is language in that treaty that allows America to take back control of that canal under certain provisions. There have been many legal experts. I know you love them so much, the legal experts in this town who write at the Washington Post and the New York Times, who said, Trump can't really do that. Well, Joe, you tell me, can Trump do that?
Sure he can. There's a provision in there for the use of military force to take back the canal should the neutrality of the canal be denied. And there's just no doubt that there is no place for the Communist Party of China to be controlling 2 locks inside the Panama Canal. The fact that the Panamanian government thinks that's just fine is stupid. They're being paid to say that by the Communist Chinese. Trump is right, as usual, on the major things. The Panama Canal Treaty was a strategic disaster. It was done by people who were do-gooders, who thought this was a very nice thing to do, who didn't think about what happened during World War II when the Japanese tried to blow up the Panama Canal. Now, why did the Japanese try to do that? Because the Panama Canal was strategically important. So the bottom line is it was a bad deal, and Trump has a right to be concerned about it. And once again, Trump is right on the money.
Joe, wanted to ask you about this new report coming out of the Washington Post. Joe Biden is apparently angry that Merrick Garland did not wage a more aggressive lawfare against Trump, as if it wasn't aggressive enough. And the Post says that Biden now regrets picking Garland and blames him for his election failure. Did we expect this? Did you expect this reversal on Garland?
Yes, of course, because you got to remember, Joe Biden is a hack. He is a conniving, sleazy hack. And he uses people, they are grifters, Look, I was born and raised in Delaware, and our motto was the state that started a nation. That was the little thing they put up on all the highways. Delaware was the state that started a nation. Actually, it became the home of corruption. Once the Bidens took over, it became a Democratic state, and by definition, that means corruption then sets in. He thought he could control Merrick Garland. And by the way, you know who the guy who insisted that he hire Merrick Garland was Ron Klain, who was then his chief of staff. And Ron Klain was the guy who devised the strategy for Al Gore that you only ask for a recount in certain counties in Florida, which lost 9-0 in the Supreme Court. So bottom line is, whatever Ron Klain wants, you want to do the opposite of it. Merrick Garland was a disaster from day one because he didn't understand the role of the Attorney General, and he succumbed to the pressure that the president put upon him through the New York Times, regularly saying he was not satisfied with his performance. These guys all deserve each other. They all deserve each other, and they were directly responsible for re-electing Donald Trump through lawfare.
Joe Digenova is our guest. And, Joe, we also got reports over the last 10 days that the Biden administration was auctioning off materials for the building of the border wall. I mean, all this happy time. Remember how he did the photo op with Trump at the White House, and it's going to be a peaceful transfer of power. And look at what he's doing with literally auctioning off the materials that are federal property that have been paid for by the taxpayers just to stymie the efforts to rebuild the wall. My question is, what can be done legally to stop it, and who can go to jail for this?
Well, I understand that there is an injunction now in place from a court in Texas preventing any further sales. It's a nationwide injunction of the wall, so that's stopped. And Biden, interestingly enough, has said that he will abide by the court order. This will be the only court order he has agreed to abide by since he's been president of the United States. The answer is the selling off of that material could very well be a crime, but it is one of many by the Biden administration. And we've heard nothing, by the way, from the incoming Trump administration about whether or not they take the appointment of a special counsel. All of his advisors have gone silent on this. It's really fascinating. It's like they don't want to touch it. It's a big mistake because they need to have grand juries going to the 51 who signed the letter, to Eric Ciaramella, the guy who led the NSC revolt against Trump. Remember the little Eric Ciaramella, the name that could never be mentioned? Bottom line is, there are a list of things, which now includes, according to the Wall Street Journal, a palace coup starting in January of 2021 to hide from the American people the literal constitutional incapacitation of the sitting president. The people who thwarted that committed a crime. They conspired to deprive the people of the United States of rightful governance, and that needs to be investigated with a federal grand jury. And that would include Ron Klain, Susan Rice, and everybody else who was involved in making sure that the president's incapacity was never made public.
Joe Digenova, can you stick with us for one more segment? There's a lot of year-end stuff that we want to get to, including some Supreme Court decisions that were made, some Supreme Court arguments that are pending, and also potentially a Supreme Court justice, or maybe two, stepping down during Trump's next term. So can we discuss all that in a moment?
Oh, sure.
I love asking questions when I already know the answer. Joe Digenova will stick with us, but first it's 7:15 WMAL. If you're watching MSNBC or really any of the networks that are so in the tank for the liberal radical left, you'll see their year-end reviews, and amongst them they'll say, one of the real tragedies this year, Joe Digenova, is that the Supreme Court took such a beating in its public image that, a Supreme Court used to have such a high reputation amongst the American people, but now it's seen as just another place. Well, it's because those very same people on those shows have been lying and degrading Clarence Thomas, Justice Alito, Brett Kavanaugh, saying lies about false ethics accusations. They've single-handedly tried to downgrade the reputation of the Supreme Court. From your perspective, what is this year with regard to the Supreme Court, their legacy, and what they were able to achieve? And if anything needs to be done to sort of revamp the public image of the Supreme Court. Where's Chief Justice Roberts, by the way, with a proactive profile trying to right some of these lies and deceptions about his body?
Lying low, as usual, which sometimes may be the best thing for a Chief Justice to do. The biggest concern is the way Sheldon Whitehouse and Dick Durbin have tried to destroy the image of the court for partisan political purposes.
Yeah.
That is despicable in a constitutional sense that I can't even enunciate on the radio. The truth is the Supreme Court did its job. When Jack Smith decided he was going to try and remove a president from office by using the criminal justice system with the encouragement of President Biden and Merrick Garland, he demanded a quick decision from the Supreme Court on presidential immunity. And when the Supreme Court said, no, this is a very important issue, we're going to take our time, it's going back to the D.C. Circuit, and they got a slovenly opinion from the D.C. Circuit, went to the Supreme Court, and bingo, Trump won.
Yeah.
He destroyed them in the Supreme Court on presidential immunity. The problem with the people who criticize this court is that for 60 years, they got everything they wanted from a liberal court. And when it's turned conservative, they didn't like the results, and so they didn't like the court anymore, and they wanted to increase the number of justices, put term limits on, you name it, they wanted to destroy it. This is what Democrats do when they don't get their way. They either change the rules or they riot.
There's also some suggestion, Joe, that in the next 4 years, Justice Alito, possibly Justice Clarence Thomas, might step down. There were also discussions that Justice Sotomayor might be reaching the end of her time on the Supreme Court. Yeah. What do you think? And will Trump have the same sort of protocols in place that he did in his first term when he picked 3 pretty good justices?
I think that there's no reason to believe that Trump will be any different in the way he selects justices. Clarence Thomas is not going to step down. He will never allow his enemies to win. He will die on the court. Sotomayor, who knows? She's got diabetes, but she seems to be pretty prickly and alive, and she's pretty pissed that people are trying to get her to step down.
Yeah.
And therefore, I don't think she's going to step down either. Alito seems to be quite pleased with the way he's functioning and doing things. I don't anticipate him stepping down. I mean, it's just hard for me to believe that anybody's going to step down in the next 4 years. Again, if there's a change, it's going to be a result of Mother Nature.
Okay.
Well, and I just want to ask you really quickly about Sotomayor. It seems like the left is really bullying her to get off of the court. What effect do you think that has on her specifically? Do you think that she takes this seriously? Because again, they seem to see her as the only opportunity to get a new justice.
Well, they do, and I think what it does is it makes her even more stubborn than she is. I consider her to be an incompetent justice. Some of the things that she says almost rival Ketanji Brown Jackson. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that Ketanji Brown Jackson says are just beyond belief. It seems like she doesn't even know what she's talking about. Sotomayor is just an old lefty. She's an old Latina lefty. And there's just, she's Cesar Chavez, I mean, she's just there. She's not going anywhere, and all they're going to do is make her mad. And she's stubborn. That's the way she is. She's a prickly old Latina. She's not going anywhere. And the more they talk about her leaving, the more she wants to stay.
Mm-hmm.
So, Joe, as we ramp up, we're 3 weeks away now from President Trump being sworn in to the oath of office. We hope. Exactly. Let's see what these next 3 weeks pretend. I'm sure you saw it last week. It was floated in the Hill by 2 constitutional law experts that the Democrats can still stop this, that they can exercise the Article 3 of the 14th Amendment, that a person who leads an insurrection against the Constitution is ineligible to hold federal office. Never mind the fact that Donald Trump's never been charged with that crime of insurrection, let alone convicted. But do you think Jamie Raskin and his ilk could even try to do this before January 6th?
You have to remember, Jamie Raskin is a very, very sick individual. He fancies himself an expert on the Constitution. Mm-hmm. He's a snarly, nasty, classic leftist, nutso Democrat. He pretends to be a scholar. He's not. He's a hack. He's a constitutional hack. And yes, listen, these Democrats are nuts. Their lust for power is unbounded. They cannot stand it that they control nothing in Washington now. And so what do? They go right back to the old playbook. They have the perfect leader in the House, by the way. Hakeem Jeffries is a thug. The language that he uses is inflammatory. It's nasty. It just borders on suggesting violence against people. He is a really sick dude. And his perfect match is Jamie Raskin. By the way, the thing that's fascinating to me is that AOC gets knocked off by Jerry Conley, this lefty nutso from Fairfax County, who's been around for years, never done anything. He's famous for making smart aleck comments during serious congressional hearings. That's his main contribution to Congress, being a nasty partisan. So I think the Democrats, they're in a holy war internally about their own future, but they've managed to continue focusing on Donald Trump. By the way, the American people voted on the insurrection on January 6th. They voted for Trump.
They're literally thwarting the will of the American people because they know best.
They want to take another vote on that, and here's what I say. Let them do it. I hope they try to do it. It'll be wonderful. It'll make sure we win in the upcoming 26 elections.
Joe Digenova, Happy New Year to you. It's always a blessing to have you every Monday, and thank you for joining us again today.
God bless America.
Amen to that. And for those of you who think we're overstating the case about Jamie Raskin, let me just remind you, this was in February of last year. This was at an event at Politics and Prose, just about 3 blocks away from where I'm sitting right now on Connecticut Avenue. Listen.
What can be put into the Constitution can slip away from you very quickly. And the greatest example going on right now before our very eyes is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which they're just disappearing with a magic wand, as if it doesn't exist, even though it could not be clearer what it's stating. And so, they want to kick it to Congress, so it's going to be up to us on January 6, 2025, to tell the rampaging Trump mobs that he's disqualified. And then we need bodyguards for everybody in Civil War conditions, all because
this is a bloodthirsty, dangerous maniac. You talk about Trump inciting violence. Yet Trump never said anything as despicable as what you just heard here.
Right.
Bodyguards for everyone, Civil War conditions, up to us to beat back the mobs to render Trump disqualified.
Says. They're always on the edge of encouraging violence, always.
And he's an elder, respected statesman, ranking member in the Judiciary Committee for the Democrats. That's Jamie Raskin. And
scary.
Things aren't quite settled yet, everybody. Just keep your eyes open. It's 7:25. It's 7:36 here on O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in. And we welcome all of our listeners on the digital stream that is now operating and fully functional. Julie Gunlock, it's like nothing ever happened. Everything's fine.
That's right. Everything's fine. We're back.
Why do I think I'm going to get blamed for this? At 8:05, Sheriff Chuck Jenkins will be our guest, Frederick County. And then at 8:35, Craig Shirley, presidential historian, author of, he's really the official historian and biographer of Ronald Reagan. And he will reflect on the passing of James Earl Carter. That's Julie Gunlock. I'm Larry O'Connor. And we are playoff bound, Julie Gunlock. Last night, Washington Commanders. Woo-hoo. Is there any doubt that, once again, a nail-biter, overtime, Jaden Daniels marches his team down the field at Northwest, and I think the city is still buzzing. I'm thinking our power outage here at the radio station was caused by all the electricity sucked up by Northwest Stadium yesterday on that special Sunday night game, a packed crowd, and they were pleased when the Commanders beat the Falcons, thus ensuring a playoff spot. And Trevor Matich joins us now. I mean, what more can be said? I mean, there's no doubt now Jaden Daniels is Rookie of the Year, isn't he?
There's no way anybody else could be Rookie of the Year, not just because of the stats and the records and all the rest, but this is the third consecutive game that Washington has won on the last play. One on defense, 2 on offense. To go with a couple of last-second wins earlier in the season, Jaden Daniels has been magic. And you talk about electricity. Virginia looks like is planning a fusion power plant. They don't need to go to all that effort. They just need to find a way to hook up Jaden Daniels, and he'll power the whole state.
Really well said. So the Commanders have been on a great run here in December as well, undefeated in the month, and that's when you want a team to get hot, obviously, especially the way the NFL playoffs are. Because playoff games often are close, and this team seems like if they can stay close and be in it in the fourth quarter, they're going to figure out a way to win. So, I mean, are the Eagles starting to get nervous?
I think the Eagles should be nervous. The Eagles are 13-3 right now. I mean, they're one of the best teams in the league, not just the NFC. But you're right about being hot at the right time. And part of the reason, a big reason, maybe the biggest reason that Washington is so hot is because Jaden Daniels is making plays off schedule. In other words, defenses will try to mess with rookie quarterbacks by giving them disguises in coverage and blitzes they might not recognize because they're rookies. Mm-hmm. Well, when things like that happen, Jaden Daniels has the knack of being able to escape the pressure and then either complete a pass downfield or run down the field. He was the leading rusher for this team in the game against the Falcons by far, and a lot of those rushes were when he just left the pocket and decided to go scramble. And so you talk about getting hot at the right time. To be able to turn a negative play into a positive one, play after play after play, is one of the reasons this team is hot heading into the playoffs.
Now, the cynics and people who are constantly looking at the burgundy and gold glass as half empty will say this Atlanta Falcons team is terrible. They should have not even made it to overtime or had to go to overtime. They should have dominated this game at home. Are there concerns here that the Commanders are still not dominating when they should dominate against teams that they are clearly superior to?
Oh, there are concerns. I mean, Atlanta is battling for a division championship with Tampa. So they gave their every level best against the Commanders. And they now don't control their destiny into the playoffs. They have to win next week and hope they get help elsewhere. So it's not like the Falcons shut it down. But at the same time, Washington is not impregnable. I mean, they are a team that their defense, for example, gave up 82 yards rushing to Bijan Robinson, the great running back for the Falcons, in the first half. And then for some inexplicable reason, when the Falcons were up 17-7 at halftime, they decided to not hand the ball to Bijan Robinson anymore. He only had 8 yards in the second half on 4 carries. So that helped Washington because good running backs have gashed them in the past. And so these are things that they're not perfect. They have flaws, and those flaws are being covered up right now by the borderline miraculous play by their quarterback.
Dan Quinn, head coach in his first season, is really showing something here. It's got to be said. Could you reflect a little bit on what he's done with this team, considering what he inherited and the personnel he inherited? And let's face it, I mean, he hasn't been able to single-handedly assemble the team that he would normally have had because a lot of it was inherited from the prior regime. Is it worth noting that Dan Quinn has really turned things around with his attitude and with how he's got this team playing?
Yes, he actually gets most of the credit. In addition to the entire brain trust that drafted Jaden Daniels in the first round at quarterback in this last draft. The thing is, they brought in a couple of key defenders. Wagner and Luvu on defense. Linebackers have been outstanding for them. You've got to credit, Dan Quinn. He is a defensive-minded coach, and he's put this defense together with pieces that make plays and complement each other well. And then they've done a borderline miraculous job. Cliff Kingsbury, offensive coordinator, led by Dan Quinn and his vision for it, of getting Jaden Daniels in position to be able to thrive.
Yeah.
And that's something that you've got to, it sort of parallels Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes with the Chiefs, because Patrick Mahomes came in. Now, he didn't start as a rookie like Daniels does, but they were able to make a system that played to Patrick Mahomes' strengths. And Mahomes had the professional humility to submit to the system first and then create on the move when the system broke down during a play, which is exactly what you see right now from the offensive coaching staff and the head coach of Washington towards their young quarterback, Jaden Daniels.
Trevor, I know that you're extraordinarily busy with this unprecedented college football postseason and bowl season that we're experiencing right now, and you've been killing it there for ESPN on college football, as you always do. So we always appreciate you carving out time for us after a Commanders game. So thank you so much, and Happy New Year to you.
Thank you, Larry. Happy New Year to you, too, and it's an honor to come on. I appreciate you having me.
It's 7:43. Now, I think we can all agree that Tim Walz is a weirdo, right? And which is funny, Julie Gunlock, because remember, the reason he got named the running mate to Kamala Harris is because he coined this fake meme that that J.D. Vance was weird, right?
Yeah, yeah.
When in fact he is, I mean, the definition of weird.
So weird.
And then there's his wife.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, right, exactly. So whenever they decide to put out a selfie video on social media, we're all for it because we like to point out how weird they are.
Yes.
So here they were yesterday sharing with the entire world on social media their little family debate that they're having about throwing away a computer box. Listen.
Okay.
I don't want to be in this.
Yeah, I know you don't want to be. We were just discussing, look at this beautiful Apple box, and it's the end of the year. Gwen and I are cleaning. Yes, it's empty. It's empty, Gwen. We see that. And we were just mentioning as Gen Xers and late boomers, the idea of throwing away such a nice Apple box is really a challenge. So we're starting a new one.
It's a good box.
It is a good box, and we might someday put the computer that's outdated back in it. But really, people, we're making this decision. We're starting the new year right. We're throwing it away.
It's not the new year yet. Maybe just hang on.
No, we're throwing it away.
All right, so you can tell the anguish here that they...
No.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I totally feel this. He's getting made fun of on Twitter. You know, Scott Jennings is like, this guy's such a weirdo, which I never disagree with Scott Jennings. I totally understand this. Every Christmas, my mom and I agonize over which boxes we should throw away. And there are some really sturdy, nice boxes. You know, I think people who don't understand this are not the rappers in the family. Because you get these really flimsy boxes and there's really nice boxes. And it is a debate in my house whether my husband just wants me to throw them all away. Okay,
Julie.
so am I weirdo? Am I totally weird?
So Apple does make very nice boxes.
Really
for their
nice
products.
boxes.
So does Microsoft, by the way. But the boxes, what are you going to do with it?
You save it, and then when you have a gift,
Save it for what?
Okay,
So you're going to give a gift to somebody that's in a box that says like Apple laptop,
And they open
and
it
it's
up
going to
and
be
it's a
cookies
sweater.
or brownies, yeah, or some. That's awful. Why would you do that to somebody?
maybe not an Apple box, but there are some really nice sturdy boxes that you can buy. And
What's the ad
agonize.
campaign where the guy has to train people not to become their parents? Right? Progressive insurance. You've become this. You don't
Yes,
need to
I
keep the
have.
box. Throw the box out.
I just think people who are criticizing them are not the rappers.
This makes you weirder than Tim Walz. You realize?
I know it
he
does.
can actually
I'm
bring
sorry.
himself to throw out the box.
I guarantee you there are people listening right now who are like, yes, I totally agree that it's sometimes hard.
This is a really good box. We
throw.
should keep this for something.
Totally. This is me. This is a really good box. I have boxes in my basement.
How much does a really good box cost? If you need a box, you can buy a box.
Right, but they're like $10.
It's $7.53. Coming up, Frederick County Sheriff Chuck Jenkins and presidential historian Craig Shirley. And we got to talk about the Pop-Tarts Bowl. The Pop-Tarts Bowl coming up.